Every year, millions of people around the world celebrate the story of St. Patrick driving the snakes out of Ireland. It's a foundational myth, celebrated with parades, green clothing, and heavy drinking. We are told the patron saint stood on a hillside, holy staff in hand, and banished every last slithering creature from the Emerald Isle into the sea. But the academic establishment is hiding a terrifying biological fact. Post-glacial Ireland never had any snakes to begin with. The story we are taught in school isn't just a charming folktale, it is a fabricated cover-up for a brutal, deliberate historical erasure. Let's start with the hard science that completely demolishes the St. Patrick legend. During the Pleistocene epoch, the Earth was gripped by the last major ice age. Ireland was covered in massive glaciers, and that wiped out all cold-blooded life. When the Earth rapidly warmed and the glaciers melted, rising sea levels severed the land bridge connecting Ireland to Britain and the rest of Europe. This created a permanent freezing water barrier. While fast-moving, warm-blooded mammals like brown bears, wild boars, and wolves eventually made it across the land bridge before it sank. Cold-blooded reptiles were simply too slow. There is zero archaeological, geological, or fossil evidence of snakes ever existing in post-Ice Age Ireland. So why did the early church invent a story about a man banishing creatures that weren't even physically there? The story of St. Patrick's great miracle wasn't a miracle at all. It was a smokescreen, designed to hide a 1,500-year-old historical crime. Long before the Celts arrived, ancient Irish texts like the Lebor Gabala Érenn, known as the Book of Invasions, state that the Tuatha Dé Danann ruled the land. But unlike every other ancient tribe, they didn't arrive by boat. The texts explicitly state they arrived from the sky, descending in dark, smoke-filled clouds that blocked out the sun for 3 entire days. They were depicted as tall, radiant beings who possessed a profound knowledge of science, architecture, medicine, and what the primitive locals could only describe as magic. Official history laughs this off as pure mythology. But if a massive fleet of advanced aircraft landed in an uncontacted, primitive region today, how would the locals describe it? They wouldn't have the vocabulary for aerospace engineering, combustion engines, or atmospheric entry. They would talk about radiant gods, descending from smoky clouds that eclipse the sun. The Tuatha Dé Danann weren't gods. They were a highly advanced civilization. And the centuries-long campaign to rebrand them as mischievous fairies and little leprechauns is one of the most successful acts of historical censorship in human history. The ancient texts don't just describe their arrival, they describe their impossible medical technology. Soon after arriving, the Tuatha Dé Danann fought a massive war against a rival race known as the Fir Bolg. During the battle, the king of the Tuatha, Nuada, had his arm completely severed. For a primitive Bronze Age tribe, this would mean death by infection, or permanent crippling. But according to the texts, their chief medical officer, Diane Kecht, designed and attached a fully functional, articulated silver arm to the king. Nuada could move the metal fingers, just like a real hand. Centuries later, historians wrote this off as a fantasy story. But today, with the advent of neural-linked bionic prosthetics, a functional silver arm isn't magic anymore, it's advanced cybernetics. Furthermore, the texts say another physician, Mayak, later performed a procedure to regenerate Nuada's actual flesh arm. We are reading primitive accounts of advanced prosthetics and genetic tissue cloning, written thousands of years before mainstream science says it was possible. Before we look at the terrifying weapons they used to conquer the island, I want to ask you a question. What do you think the famous Stone of Destiny actually was? Was it A, a magical rock that could speak? B, a primitive throne for kings? Or C, an advanced biometric scanner? Drop your answer in the comments right now. I'll give you the answer in just a second. If you guessed C, you are on the exact right track. The undeniable proof of this civilization's advanced nature lies in the 4 magical treasures they brought with them, from 4 mythical cities in the north. Look at these ancient myths through a modern technological lens, and a terrifying picture emerges. First was the Spear of Lu, brought from the city of Gorius. Ancient texts describe it as a weapon that never missed its target, and was so unfathomably hot, it had to be stored in a massive vat of water just to prevent it from spontaneously burning down entire cities. That isn't a sharpened stick. That is a primitive eyewitness description of a directed energy weapon, or a radioactive ballistic missile. Second was the Sword of Light, brought from Findius. This was a weapon that glowed with blinding, luminous intensity, and could slice effortlessly through any armor or shield. Today, we call that a plasma blade, or a high-powered cutting laser. Third was the Cauldron of the Dagda, brought from Marius. This was a vessel that could supposedly provide an endless supply of food out of thin air, ensuring no army ever went hungry. An item that can generate organic sustenance from nothing is the very definition of a localized matter replicator. And finally, the Leah Fail, or the Stone of Destiny brought from Phaleus. This device supposedly screamed, or emitted a loud, piercing frequency, only when the genetic, rightful High King of Ireland stood upon it. It wasn't magic, it was a biometric scanner, programmed to verify a specific DNA sequence or energy signature. These aren't fairy tales, they are fragmented, misunderstood memories of a sophisticated technological arsenal. And they needed this arsenal to fight their greatest enemy, the Fomorians. The texts describe the Fomorians as a monstrous, giant race that demanded heavy tribute. Their leader Baelor possessed a single, devastating evil eye. When this eye was opened, it unleashed a beam of destruction so powerful, it instantly incinerated entire armies and scorched the earth for miles. This wasn't a literal eyeball. It was a massive, weaponized energy cannon. The Tuatha Dé Danann defeated Baelor only when their champion, Luz, launched a hyper-dense sling stone directly into the eye, causing it to overload and destroy the Fomorian army. The most undeniable evidence of this lost civilization isn't just written in the forbidden text. It is built directly into the earth. I'm talking about Newgrange. Mainstream archaeology insists Newgrange is just a primitive passage tomb built by illiterate Neolithic farmers in 3200 BCE. That date makes it 500 years older than the Great Pyramids of Giza and older than Stonehenge. We are expected to believe that primitive farmers using only deer antlers and stone tools quarried 200,000 tons of rock. We are told they effortlessly transported 97 massive curbstones, some weighing several tons, and perfectly waterproofed the massive roof using a specific mixture of sea sand and packed soil. They even transported brilliant white quartz from mountains 50 miles away to create a reflective facade. But the real smoking gun is the engineering. For 364 days a year, the inner chamber of Newgrange is pitch black. But on the exact morning of the winter solstice, a narrow beam of sunlight pierces through a perfectly engineered roof box, travels 62 feet down a stone corridor, and illuminates the center chamber for exactly 17 minutes. Primitive farmers do not build with hyper-precise astronomical alignment. Newgrange is not a tomb. It is a megalithic computer, built by the Tuatha Dé Danann to track celestial movements. But it goes even deeper. Modern acoustic engineers have tested the inner chamber of Newgrange and found it possesses incredible acoustic resonance. When a specific frequency is hummed, specifically 110 Hz, the entire stone chamber vibrates, creating standing waves that have been proven to alter human brainwave activity, shifting the mind into a state of deep trance. This exact same 110 Hz acoustic anomaly is found in the ancient megaliths of Malta and Turkey. They were utilizing cymatics and sound technology that we are only just beginning to understand today. When you put the pieces together, the conclusion is undeniable. The biological impossibility of snakes in Ireland proves that St. Patrick's legend is a lie. When the early church arrived, they found the remnants of a highly advanced civilization and a population that still guarded their secrets. St. Patrick famously lit a massive paschal fire on the Hill of Slane to challenge the High King's fire at Tara, a symbolic battle of ancient technologies. Because the church couldn't physically destroy the massive megalithic computers like Newgrange, they destroyed the memory instead. Monastic scribes engaged in a practice called euhemerization. They methodically rewrote the ancient texts, stripping the Tuatha Dé Danann of their advanced technology. They rewrote them as mere mortal kings who died in battle, or claimed they were fallen angels and descendants of Noah, just to force them into the church's biblical timeline. Eventually, the Tuatha Dé Danann were downgraded from a superior starfaring race to demons, and finally into the whimsical hidden fairies of modern Irish folklore. The snakes, a global ancient symbol for advanced wisdom, medicine, and DNA, were the target of a brutal, systematic erasure. The lie about the snakes hides the truth of a lost super-civilization. But the establishment didn't just cover up the history of Ireland. They have been hiding the truth of human history across the entire globe. If you want to know the terrifying secret Christopher Columbus wrote in his private journals, and the massive African fleet that beat him to the Americas by 2 centuries, click the video on your screen right now. I'll see you there.